This boy, despite having a girl sit on his lap, is so invisible that his classmates can't even notice his presence. Not even his own mom can seem to realize he's there. His existence is as transparent as air. When it was time for graduation pictures, he was there, yet people still assumed he hadn't participated and photoshopped him into the group photo. On a normal day, when he handed out assignments, even though he stood right in front of the teacher, they didn't see him. After half a year of school, none of his classmates had ever noticed him, and his name was never called during class. His presence was so faint that the teacher even thought he wasn't in the class. But there was one girl in class who always seemed to find him. Jenny wanted to figure out just how invisible George really was, but George ignored her. This made Jenny mad, and she puffed her cheeks, showing off her beauty, but George still didn't respond. So, Jenny threatened him with the photos, forcing George to comply. He cautiously knelt on his chair to fulfill Jenny's first request. Jenny then made him kneel on the floor, stand up, and finally, dance on the chair. This caused the teacher to finally notice George.
いつから気づかれてた?
After class, Jenny praised George for being the center of attention that day, but George, furious, called her his enemy. Jenny, feeling angry, poked his face, but when George still didn't respond, she grew bored and left. The next day, as she passed by George, she showed an unhappy expression. George, reflecting on the morning's events, realized he hadn't responded to Jenny's greeting. So, Jenny decided to play a little punishment game. She sat on George's lap, telling him if they stayed silent, no one would notice them. The first time a girl got this close to him, George's mind instantly blanked. Jenny told him he had to reply when someone greeted him, then whispered in his ear, making George so shy he seemed to teleport away from her. The next day, Jenny was shocked to see George asking questions in class. When George explained, he said he only asked questions so the teacher would know he was there. If he didn't, he'd have to shout out loud to get their attention. After hearing that George had never been called on, Jenny got another idea to cheer him up. When the teacher asked a question, she excitedly raised her hand, saying she didn't know the answer. Then, she recommended George to answer the question. It was the first time George had ever been called on to answer in class. Unfortunately, he had no idea what the answer was, so Jenny gave him the answer. Later, Jenny asked for George's contact information. On the weekend, George sat alone on a bench, and Jenny approached him, asking why. He explained he had planned to buy a game but spent a lot of time just getting a tissue. Once he finally got the tissue, he happily sat on the bench. Jenny found his behavior amusing and took a picture of him. Then, Jenny had another idea and took a selfie with him, telling him they should hang out next time. That evening, Jenny sent him the picture, eagerly awaiting their next meeting. The next day, during a physical education class, George had to run laps. Since no one noticed him, he had to remind his classmates every time he finished a lap. Out of shape, he was gasping for air in the hallway afterward. Jenny noticed him but, sensing his embarrassment, George quickly tried to avoid her because he didn't want her to touch him after he'd just finished training. Jenny, however, continued to approach, even smelling his sweat and saying it didn't bother her. This behavior made George's heart race, and he quickly pulled away from Jenny, feeling overwhelmed.